Alright, YouTube, it seems that a lot of people on my channel, not always people who consider themselves left of center, by the way, don't understand the difference between actual capitalism and corporatism or plutocracy or some of the Gilded Age stuff or some of the nonsense that goes on now that we have to suffer with. I decided to simply make a video to explain this general concept as opposed to continuing to have to deal with people who don't actually know what they're talking about making comments on my videos. Anytime I talk about something, uh, I get a lot of people who appear to believe that I'm a conservative, which I'm not, or a partisan Republican. I'm not a member of the Republican Party. That ship sailed when W turned out to be a complete fucking retard. Any more than I am a liberal, which I'm not, or a Democrat, which I'm not. I'm an independent. I'm a libertarian on a great many issues, which is to say that I support real, authentic capitalism. I will point it out this way. A preface to this. Believe it or not, Teddy Roosevelt, who was a progressive, was probably the greatest capitalist that we've had leading this country as the President of the United States since the times of the Revolution, or at least the times of Andrew Jackson, or something along those lines. Now, this may be a mystery to people, because they'll look at Teddy Roosevelt and say, well, no, he supported unions and used the government to attack business entities, trust busting, breaking up the monopolies and so forth. He instituted regulations on working conditions and child labor and all of these. He made socialist programs, supposedly. He created these vast tracts of federal land, the park system that we have. Oh, he couldn't have possibly been a capitalist. He was. What Theodore Roosevelt realized, and what many people who claim to be free market capitalists today but really aren't ignore, is that if you have a monopolistic structure in place, you do not have capitalism. Capitalism requires, it can't exist without competition. If you have a system in which there's no competition left in a specific type of industry, often through government intervention, I'll get to that in a moment, then you don't have capitalism. You have an interventionist system. You have a new Gilded Age. What happened during the late 1800s, during that era? The era of the coal barons, the land barons, the steel barons, the rail barons. What happened? Price fixing, monopolization, trusts, and so forth. What happened, and it's happening again today, and this is why I say we no longer operate under a capitalistic system, which is why our economy is fundamentally screwed up. We no longer enjoy the kind of system that we had even as late as the 50s or the 60s for the most part, that really served our nation well. That's the period of time from the end of the Gilded Age into that era. That's the period of the greatest American prosperity, the most prosperity that any nation ever enjoyed at any point in human history. It was true capitalism, more or less, almost unadulterated, almost without any hesitation at all. Only the rise thereof of the military-industrial complex and the rise of the new Gilded Age really destroyed that and made things the way that they are today. And I think most people that are alive today, of course, weren't alive to actually enjoy that capitalism. You have the baby boomers born sort of at the very end of this era. They remember with nostalgia what it was like during their childhood. A lot of people, of course, will drag in, oh, well, civil rights and segregation. Yeah, those were side issues. Those have nothing to do with the economy. Those were remnants of an earlier era of people not being able to deal with racial differences. It has nothing to do with the economic system whatsoever. It's a social system. What happened in the age of the steel barons and the coal barons and the rail monopolies and so forth is that a bunch of businessmen, which had made it big, steadily bought up chunks of the government, carpet-bagged their allies into the government, into various bureaus and so forth, in order to control aspects of the government, to make sure that they would be left alone to enjoy their profits. At the same time, wages and working standards and everything regarding the working class declined. Prices rose to an equilibrium, which it wouldn't have risen to had it not been for the fact that the government, staffed by a bunch of carpetbaggers and corporate interests, were making sure that it was able to do so. You no longer had actual competition going on, because what would happen if some upstart wanted to compete with one of these monopolistic entities? They would get shot down. They wouldn't be able to get the licenses involved, or they would get sued into non-existence, or they would get physically harassed and threatened. Now, because aspects of the government on the state and federal level at the time were controlled by people who were part of those industries. They were literally nothing more than the bankrolling allies of both the politicians. This is essentially the same as the donor class we have today, of the politicians and of the heads of those industries, who were in collusion with one another. It doesn't matter if you have 5 or 6 different corporate entities controlling an aspect of the economy. You know, you have this rail system and that rail system, and then the third rail system owned by different individuals, but they're having meetings and smoking cigars together and fixing the prices, and they're acting in collusion. They simply own different chunks of the same network of infrastructure, or different chunks of the same distribution methods, or something akin to that. There is no competition. These people who are supposed to be under a capitalistic system competing to offer better service at a lower price or something along those lines, or to attract better workers by paying them a bit more, they didn't have a need to do so, because those groups of people, which got together in these various monopolistic trusts, simply said, we're not going to compete with each other. We're going to make more money at the end of the day if we simply work together as a cohesive total. Yes, no one of us owns the whole system, but our own chunks of that system are worth a hell of a lot more if we don't compete with one another. That's what happened. And it relied upon the government and the carpetbaggers at the time to continue existing as such. We are using this same system today. The banks and various corporate entities and so forth, especially after Citizens United, own most of our economy. They siphon most of the wealth. There's a reason why wages tend to be stagnant and low. Poverty right now is high. Unemployment, I don't care about the official numbers given. Unemployment is very high. We have a lot of problems in our economy. It's not because capitalism has failed. It's because capitalism is no longer supported by the U.S. government. The U.S. government, under the military-industrial system we've been using since after the Ike era, although technically it was born under FDR and Ike, that system rewards certain business entities, no-bid contracts and things of that manner from the government, paid for by the taxpayers, in order to get munitions, in order to get machines built, and all sorts of things. Pharmaceutical industry, it doesn't really matter. What happens is that in our haste to compete with the military-industrial complexes of our enemies, we created our own, very well-oiled military-industrial complex. Yes, it gives a great rise to some really good machinery and technology. It's also giving rise to the automation that's going to displace most of the low-level workers in this country within the next couple of decades, just so you know. That's going to be the next problem we experience, and it'll destroy our economy if we don't tackle it now. That's why we need a new trust-busting era right now. We need to do away with the military-industrial complex. The difference is this. Under the military-industrial complex sort of carpet-bagging barons and monopolies system that we use today, and which we used in the late 1800s, as opposed to real capitalism, under such a system, there are many corporate entities, many banking entities, many, we even say bureaus in many cases, that do not experience any competition whatsoever for... They don't compete for workers, so they're not going to pay them more. They're not going to lower their prices, even if they were capable of doing so. The government has screwed up the economy on trade as well. So, I mean, they can't lower their prices. They're not going to pay their workers more. They're not really interested. They're not going to entertain unions unless they have no other choice. You'd see like Walmart, which basically bans unionization of its employees and goes after them quite heavily. There's a reason that they do that, and there's a reason that they get away with it. I would say under real capitalism, yeah, the workers of a company have every right to unionize. No company has the right to simply fire a bunch of employees because they happen to picket or something like that, unless they stop working, in which case, yeah, okay, go ahead, I guess. Protecting unions under such conditions is hit or miss. Sometimes it's the right thing to do, sometimes their demands are strange, not really something that needs to be listened to. Unfortunately, what we've got is the party that says unions are always right, and then the party that says unions should be banned. In the United States, it's really rather strange. We don't have real capitalism, though. For example, 3D printing, drones, all of these new technologies, what has the government done? Instead of allowing the free market to determine the course of these various things, it bans them, or it regulates them into non-existence. Now you have to get a license in order to use a drone. Now, is your little $10 little, basically an RC helicopter on steroids, really a threat to our airports? Ultimately, unless you're a complete, utter dumbass, no, of course not. Of course it's not a threat to anybody. It's just literally little more than an RC helicopter. And yet you have to get a license in order to actually own and use it. The government did that because it wants the fruits of that production, which it imagines to be in the future quite large, and it will be. Drones are going to be increasingly important within our economy, as is 3D printing. I wouldn't be surprised if they start making people pay a license to own a 3D printer because, oh, it can be used to make assault rifle parts or something like that. Some stupid fucking bullshit that they'll use as an excuse. Oh, well, it's necessary and proper for the government to regulate it now. It's exactly what they'll do. They want that money to go to their corporate donors, to their banking donors. They want people to have to take out a loan from a bank in order to afford the regulations involved. Look at marijuana. All of these states now, oh, we'll legalize marijuana. You know what the state of Vermont's trying to do? They're trying to legalize it, but they're going to have it so only these various corporate sort of pharmaceutical companies can actually grow it. You know, you can grow maybe one plant and get away with it. They're going to be growing thousands of plants. They'll be the ones selling the weed. It's a cornered market. Again, no competition. The prices will be high. The wages for the people actually producing the marijuana plants will be low. You won't be able to grow your own marijuana plants for fun and profit unless you happen to have 10,000 lying around for a license. That's their plan. It's carpetbagging. That is not capitalism. Capitalism is the government has no fucking right to tell you you can't own a drone. Fly it if you want to, make it, deliver papers with it, deliver pizza with it, or whatever. If you're halfway competent, you're not a threat to anybody in using such a thing. If you want to have a 3D printer and print out bracelets or print out gun parts, do it. You shouldn't have to have a fucking license to do so. Entrepreneurial spirit, something that the founding fathers never could have imagined, that the country would ever be so taken over by business entities that had become monopolistic. They saw capitalism, real capitalism, as literally the American dream. Everyone should own their land. They should farm their land or produce their beer or do whatever they want. You can't produce your own beer unless you're just drinking it yourself. In some states, you can't even do that. You think that you can set up a wine press and bottle your wine and sell it? No, you have to have this regulation and that restriction and this licensing fee and so forth. Yeah, poisoned alcohol is a terrible thing. Most people are competent enough, if they've got such a setup, to make it without doing so. And if they release a product that is poisonous and someone gets hurt, sue them. That's the answer. Use the judicial system. That was the way that things were meant to go. Yeah, occasionally somebody gets hurt. They get hurt all the time anyway, with perfectly legal licensed corporate products. Every once in a while we hear about somebody who opens the Monster can and there's a rat dissolved in it, or somebody's can of soup has maggots in it, or something like that. It's straight out of the Gilded Age sort of era. These corporate interests don't have your best interests at heart. They have their profits at heart. The problem is there's no competition for them. There's no reason for them to offer higher wages. Ultimately, I would like to see, as someone who supports real capitalism, a country in which a far larger total of people are self-employed, they do their own thing and are capable of doing so without getting screwed by government licensing or taxes. Right now we have a system, especially in the tax system, which goes after people that are self-employed. They're considered business entities even though they are a solitary individual marketing themselves. which is ridiculous. That's another thing the founders never could have possibly expected would happen. What we need to do is get rid of Citizens United. It's terrible. It allows corporations and banks to control people like Hillary Clinton and Ted Cruz. It should be done away with. What we should have in our political system is one in which individuals only can contribute, and there is a capped total that they can contribute. And that's all. No union donations, no corporate donations, no donations or loans from banks for campaigns, no rich donors meetings where people pay $10,000 for a plate of food, nothing like that. They shouldn't exist. That will help get some of the carpetbaggers out of our government, and then we can get to work restoring real capitalism. Get rid of these regulations and licenses that make things more expensive and cause entrepreneurs and small businesses to go out of business. No more business tax on anyone who's self-employed, severely lowered business tax for actual small and regional businesses, no more corporate loopholes whatsoever. Allow the states to protect their little enclaves like Iowa has their corn and Vermont has the home dairy farms and stuff. Yes, let the states do that if they think it's in their best interest to do so, if the people of the state vote to do so. Let them do it. Let's restore real capitalism, get the corporate and bank and union and lobby money out of our political system, and you wouldn't have this fucking problem. Because then groups like Walmart and groups like Goldman Sachs and groups like anything else under the sun won't be donating to political campaigns, and then the politicians will have no reason whatsoever. And by the way, make it a felony, a Class A felony. Give them 25 years in prison if they've taken so much as a cent or a single gift from any of these entities. If it's an individual, that's fine. That would be, and make it tax deductible too, so that, people will actually donate, because otherwise, who the fuck's going to do so? And that's all you have to do. That's how you solve the entire problem. That's why I think, I have a sneaking suspicion that one of Donald Trump's biggest plans, if he gets elected, is to go after Citizens United. I think that he's going to stack the deck against. I think he'll launch an executive attempt to force it back into the Supreme Court and do away with it. I think he'll attempt to use executive power and the bully pulpit both to do so. If he does that, he'll go down in history as probably the greatest president since Teddy Roosevelt. And that's not an exaggeration. That alone has so fucked our economy, and people don't realize how much it fucks our economy. All these free trade deals, so-called, that are really just government intervention, allowing the government to prop up corporate entities for pragmatic purposes so that they don't experience competition. That's antithetical to capitalism. All these trade deals, everything else that happens, it's all the fault of corporate and bank and union and lobby donations into our political system. You do away with that, most of our problems disappear overnight, because these groups are no longer capable of buying large sections of the political system. You have that, and then it forces the politicians to actually listen to some degree to the voters, because then they all are equal insofar as their political power goes. The only difference will be they'll still play up to the media, because the media can give them positive or negative coverage, on the nightly news. And that's another thing, the one final thing I'd point out. The government is increasingly going after the internet, trying to break all forms of encryption, get everyone's passwords, listen into everything that happens, regulate what you say on the internet to the best of their ability without blatantly violating the First and Fourth Amendments. They're going after it wholesale. They want to tax it, they want to regulate it, they want to throttle bandwidth, they want to do everything under the sun to make the internet just as much a corporate entity at its heart as everything else. Right now, I can make a video on YouTube or write a book and sell it on Amazon, or I can make a blog or whatever, and I can reach hundreds of thousands or millions of people. I've reached millions of people here on YouTube. I presumably change some people's minds when I speak on political issues. If they had their way, I'd probably have to pay some sort of tax or license or fee in order to actually make political content. And that's what we must protect above all else, because the internet is helping to end the new Gilded Age. The internet has made the outsiders more popular, it's made third parties more popular, it's made banks and corporations a lot less popular, keeps them more accountable by allowing people to instantly spread information about the shitty things that they do. The same is true of the politicians themselves. A politician makes some mistake that 20 years ago you might see covered on a few of the news stations a week later. The news stations that they haven't been bankrolled by. Meanwhile, their allies in the media will protect them and say nothing about it or spin it as a positive story about how great they are. Now, though, it's the internet that primarily is used as a source for information for the under 35 demographic especially. Therefore, we must protect it at all costs. And all of these new technologies, these new technological advances like drones, the government got way out ahead, said, oh, fuck this, and immediately slapped everyone in the face with registration for drones. So that the government will know who has them, you have to pay a fee, you can't fly it here, you can't do this with it. If the government were to attach a camera to a drone and fly it over your property, you would be expected to do nothing about it. It could peer in your windows and watch you undressing, and there's not a whole lot you can fucking do. Legally, you can't fire on the drone, you can't tell them to stop, you can't do shit. But if I were to put a camera on a drone and fly it, and look through the windows of a government building, I'd probably end up in Gitmo the next day. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Again, the founders probably would not have imagined such a scenario. They would have said, well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Either you're both going to be able to do it, or neither of you is able to do it. It was Jefferson who had this opinion first and foremost, that tyranny is anything that is allowed to the government, not allowed to the people at large. I tend to agree. It's like on firearms. People keep ranting about assault rifles. Oh, military-style assault rifles. Well, they're not military-style because there's no military that fucking uses them. You'd know that if you knew anything about the issue. You'd know that if you had more than an elementary school grasp of firearms. Unfortunately, many of them don't. And there's the problem. People's ignorance really plays into it as well. So when people say, oh, well, corporations, evil capitalism, horrible, you're thinking of plutocracy, you're thinking of the Gilded Age, you're thinking of things that are literally the opposite of actual capitalism. Capitalism requires competition. You have the ability to produce and enjoy the productivity of your labor and get in an income, a profit from it. You can't do that right now. You have to have a license or register or something, unless you're a corporate entity. Then you're given grants of taxpayer money by the government. In return, you're carpetbagging the government. You're getting all sorts of kickbacks and no-bid contracts. It's not capitalism. It didn't require any entrepreneurial technological advances or advances in efficiency or anything else for them to get that contract or to get paid by the government. And they're siphoning taxpayer money. Think about how strange this is and ask yourself if Ben Franklin or Thomas Jefferson or anything would have thought this was acceptable. Government gets financial backing from a corporation. Government then votes to increase your taxes, the taxes of the people, and takes a proportion of that and gives it back to that same corporate entity. Do you think that any one of them would have thought that that was acceptable? Maybe John Adams, Alien and Sedition Act man. He might have thought it was acceptable. I have a feeling that George Washington would have said, if the government starts doing that, then you need to think about voting a different government into power, because probably the political parties doing that, which is both of the mainstream parties, are no good. In fact, he warned against political parties altogether. And both of these parties, let's face it, at the end of the day, they want a one-party system. You listen to what they say at their debates or on the media or whatever. Any randomly chosen partisan Democrat says, vote all the Republicans out. No more Republicans, they're evil. And the Republicans say the same thing about the Democrats. Doesn't that indicate to you that they want a one-party system? Oh, but guess what? We already do, because they're both taking money from the same groups of people. The same banks, same corporations, same unions, same lobbies. They buy our political system. We need to stop that before we can address anything else. When people say, well, we've got big fixes for immigration, we got big fixes for ISIS, we've got big fixes, tax code and whatever, the donor class, the corporations and banks and unions and so forth aren't going to allow any of the people in Congress that they control to vote to actually reform any of these things unless it's in their best interest to do so. That's why we need people in government that aren't taking those donations. There's one candidate currently, well, two candidates technically, that fall into that category, and one of them wants to take more of my money anyway, and I can't support him. So ask yourself who it is within the two-party system that I favor. Of course, I've made it clear. I like Gary Johnson. I like the Libertarian Party. Because the Libertarian Party gets no corporate donations either. Because under a libertarian system, real capitalism, all these no-bid contracts would go bye-bye. There'd be no big contracts, there'd be no monopolies, there'd be none of them. All the licensing and fees that keep the little guy down, that keep him from succeeding, you know, the 40% of the cost of installing home solar is regulatory. It's the government saying you need this license and that you need to conform to this standard in order to put it up on your home. Well, that's government fees and regulations. See, if you're a corporation based in China that wants to build a solar farm, you don't have to pay that fee. You simply get the land. The government says, okay, you can have this land for $100 an acre and build your solar farm and then sell and then make more profit selling that electricity to people. But if they want to make their own electricity, fuck them. They're paying 40% on top. And that federal rebate might be going bye-bye as well. So you can look forward to the end of the solar era if that happens. It's really rather strange that people think that corporations represent true capitalism. No, they don't. Not unless they got there without government favor. I can think of a few, like Tesla or something like that are genuinely innovating. That's great. The problem is they've got an uphill battle to compete with anybody else, and at any time the government may step in because their donors goad them to do so and shut them down completely. Simply deny them a place to build a factory. Slap them with a lawsuit, something like that. That is not capitalism. That is not a free market. That is interventionism and corporatism and plutocracy. That was ended briefly by the progressive era, oddly enough, under Teddy Roosevelt. Unfortunately, he didn't go far enough. He didn't actually weed enough of the crooked bureaucrats out of the government, and it came right back the second he was gone. Taft didn't know what he was doing, of course, and couldn't keep up with it. That's about all. Peace out.